Good evening. I'd like to call the Board of Education meeting for Wednesday, October 9th to order. Can we have a roll call, Mrs. Schlueter?
Certainly. Mrs. Witkowski?
Here.
Mrs. Evans?
Here.
Mrs. Larson?
Here.
Mrs. Klein?
Here.
Mr. Alexandrovich?
Here.
Mr. Nielsen?
Here.
And I'm here.
Thank you. Has the meeting been properly posted, Dr. Pat?
It has.
Thank you. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Item 3 on the agenda is community comment. Would anyone like to make a comment? We allow up to 15 minutes of resident comment per board policy. Hearing none, we'll move on to item 4, approval of the agenda. Do I hear a motion to approve the agenda?
I'll make that motion.
Motion by Mr. Nielsen. Is there a second? Second. Second by Mrs. Klein. All those is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of approving the agenda say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Item 6, we have school board calendar. Oh, I'm sorry, item 5, school board announcements. Would anyone like to make an announcement?
Just a couple. Oh.
Go ahead.
Okay, just want to make everybody aware that October 15th, which is next week, we will have our final state aid numbers. And reminder that October 23rd, then, next board meeting is when we finalize the budget.
Thank you. I'd like to tell everyone that on Friday, October 11th, Southwood Glen is celebrating their 20th anniversary. They will be having 2 programs. It's open to all alumni, students, parents, community members. There will be a short program at 2:45 in the gym, and then there will be a second program at 4:15 in the library. Another announcement that I have, the Franklin Fire and Police Spaghetti Dinner is being held on Thursday, October 17th from 4 to 8 p.m. at the Polish Community Center, and the proceeds will be benefiting Kayla's crew. And I just want to remind my committee members that we have a meeting here at the ECC tomorrow night at 4:30 with Dr. Pats.
Thank you.
And one more item, the auction, foundation auction is November 8th, so get your tickets.
How much are tickets?
Oh, that's, I am not certain of that, but I'm sure it's on the website.
Thank you.
And you said November 8th?
Yes.
Thank you.
6 to 11, Polish Center.
At the casino one? I thought they were 60 in advance, 70. Does that sound about right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Any other announcements? Thank you. Item 6 is the school board calendar. We have a regular board meeting on Wednesday, October 23rd, here at the Education and Community Center at 6 o'clock p.m., and a regular board meeting Wednesday, November 13th, here at the ECC at 6 o'clock p.m. And Dr. Pats, do we have any confirmation on our special board meeting yet?
We don't. It looks like, I haven't heard back from everybody yet, but I'd ask you to look at December 2nd, 3rd, 4th, and 5th. We'll get the responses we've gotten back so far indicate that Wednesday, the 4th, looks good for those that have responded. So if you could let me know ASAP whether the 4th works for you, we can get that scheduled and go from there.
We're looking at a 6 o'clock start like our other meeting?
If you like, we can go anytime.
Thank you. Item 7 is liaison reports, and I have the pupil services and special education liaison report, and that is my report. And I met with Mrs. Kroll, and I'm just going to talk about teamwork and her department's goals and upcoming reports. And I'm talking about teamwork because teamwork at Franklin Public Schools, it's evident that hard work from all of our staff translates into student success, and that's especially so with the Pupil Services Department and Special Education Department. And teamwork has brought forth some benefits to the department and the district. And during Dr. Patz's State of the District message, he reported that the revenue of approximately $14,000 from the department from converting to the electronic format for our IEPs, which is individualized education program meetings, from paperwork and mailings. So we got approximately $14,000, is that correct? And that's quite a savings to the district. But another way that we're generating revenue is from Medicaid. And in 2012, 2013, the department was reimbursed for approximately $165,000. And this is done through the diligence of the teachers and the ECC staff that works directly with the parents through paperwork and data entry. And this coming school year, Mrs. Kroll told me that we're expanding our attendant care services, and that's done by hands-on assistance. Is that correct, Mrs. Kroll?
Right.
Do you want to expand
Could
on
be
that a little bit?
attendant care. Medicaid classifies it as anything where you're assisting a student with a task. It could be helping them put on their coat and their shoes. I mean, this is special ed. It also can be if you have a visual schedule for them, knowing what they do next. A lot of kids don't know restroom procedures, for example, so you might be having steps for them to follow. So if you're cueing them with those kind of things, or you're doing hand-over-hand kind of activities to teach them how to do that, those are all reimbursable through Medicaid. And we just ran a pilot with one teacher and her staff last year, and now this year we're going to be training all the staff. This is of the more significant needs students. We're going to start there.
Thank you. And then also, Mrs. Kroll worked very hard to get in with her autism support team, and she succeeded in securing a mini grant, an autism mini grant of $8,000, which will be used at Southwood Glen to secure an autism coach. And that's very exciting news for the staff and the district. And the district has had an increase in approximately 60%, is that correct, of students with autism? And it'll be used for training and extra resources. So that's exciting news for
How
our
many
district.
autism students do we have?
I don't have the numbers with me. I'm sorry. I'd hate to kind of guess at
Okay.
it. But I could get them for you. No.
And then for goals, I had attached a goal sheet, and that's Mrs. Kroll's department goals. And to tie those goals into upcoming reports, I'm going to do that because her upcoming reports that she'll be presenting to us are October 23rd, an annual health report and youth risk behavior survey report, and then in May or June, an autism review and autism grant report, and then May or June and possibly fall, because Ms. Rock will be on a leave, we'll have a SABRE alternative education review. And you'll see some of those were in the goals. But one of the goals I thought was interesting was the PBIS, the Positive Behavioral Intervention Support. When I always thought of that, I thought more of the younger students getting behavioral interventions, but you'll see there's a 3-year initiative for that for Franklin High Schools. So it's interesting to see how we'll be working on intervening on the older students. And you had an example of that we talked about.
I'm not sure I remember, but the PBIS, the Positive Behavior Intervention Supports at the high school, I mean, it's really, it's the same, it's just by level. So you have to look at, for example, attendance data, discipline data, and so on, and then you say, wow, you know, maybe we're having a problem right before lunch period. I use that as an
Yeah, we do.
example. Where we're having more kids who are late to class, or maybe more behavioral incidents, so you target that, and then that's your goal. And so it's just like the RTI, you know, you've got the 80% at the bottom, those are universal supports, and then the kids who aren't doing so well with just that need something more specific, and then, of course, the top tier. So it's really, really excellent for the high school because a lot of those things affect the way kids are achieving in the classroom. And it's really, the goal of it isn't just better behavior, it's better academic achievement. So you can eliminate those issues.
Does anyone have any questions?
I have a quick question. So the Medicaid reimbursement last year was 160 something, you said?
Yes, for last year, a little over, it was over 165,000.
165,000. And that was with a pilot program with one teacher?
Well, we get reimbursement for all our therapies, so speech, occupational, physical therapy. We bill for that and transportation.
Okay.
So that really reflects that, plus this little new piece of attendant care. But
Okay.
we'll be adding to that now by doing that with more students.
So that Medicaid reimbursement isn't new, that's something we've been doing. We're
Yes.
just adding this other piece.
Right.
Which is now going to expand this year with,
Right.
okay. got it.
Exactly.
There are some districts that, would you say they're sloppy with that?
It takes a lot of organization and effort to do this on a routine basis. I mean, I'll give Debbie Scott, she's our administrative assistant, kudos for this because she has really got that program organized. And she'll be doing the training for our staff for the attendant care. And then she collects all that data and puts it into our system. But it's really worth it. We are doing those things anyway, and if we can get reimbursement for them and sustain some of the costs of special ed, it's really important for us to do that. So,
Thank you. Next, item 8, we were going to move on to district health insurance update. Oh, we do have the representative here now? Is that-
Not yet, no,
Oh,
that's
not yet.
Chris.
Oh,
I'll
sorry.
introduce Sarah and then if you want to.
We are waiting for a representative, so if the board is all right, we'll move on to the swimming pool proposal first. Is that all right?
I'd like to introduce Sarah Nerdl and Brad Anderson, and Mark Lodi will also be stepping in on this. We had an opportunity this past year to, well, actually, this goes back about a year and a half, to take a real look at our pool situation, which is in dire need of some repairs and some attention. And this has been on our radar for a couple of years in terms of looking at it. It really turned out well in terms of timing for this project, and by well, I mean the fact that we had construction over there and had to shut down the pool this year because we couldn't get in and out of the site because of the construction. And then we looked at the need for us to relocate some swimming lessons, and Brad did a heck of a job trying to find locations, and we looked at innovative, and it didn't work out the way we would like to. And so there are a lot of reasons why this is timely at this point. So we wanted to bring it forward to the board. Sarah has spent in particular, and Brad, considerable amount of time since last spring. Oak Creek went through a very similar type of project, and I think it's just completed now. And as a matter of fact, their students were sharing our pool for some time. So we're at a point where we need to, and this is something that as we get larger projects like this, as the board asked us to do, to bring them forward to you to make you aware of them, this is one of those that when the timing is right, it's got to come to the top of the heap, so to speak. We do have some issues there that Sarah and Brad and Mark will address, so I'm not going to say a whole lot more, other than at this point in time, we're talking about planning for this project, which really started, about half of a year ago, and it will be continued planning and so on and so forth for this year, construction during the spring and throughout part of the summer, maybe, but hopefully then utilization during the summer, so timing-wise, it works out very, very well. So with that, Sarah, I'm going to turn it over to you. They have a presentation they'd like to make, and additionally, you should have gotten a copy of some questions that were asked of Sarah and the responses that her and Brad had given earlier in the day, so I'll turn it over to you.
I'm looking at it on my screen, but it's not up there.
It's a mirror. There's a mirroring thing you have to do. There you go. Go ahead, Ted.
All right, thank you for letting us be here tonight. We just put together 3 slides, and they highlight the letter that was sent out, and some of this was touched on in the questions that were brought to our attention that we responded to today. But the main overarching thing we want to stress is safety first. And the first thing we have up there is we cannot currently use our starting blocks, so we're not in line with the WIAA and NFHS guidelines. For those of you that don't know, it stands for the Wisconsin Interscholastic Athletic Association and then the National Federation of High School Guidelines for water depth and length. So our high school swimmers are currently starting in the water We have had some collisions, for especially relays, because we have a swimmer in the water and other swimmers are coming in and they run into those swimmers in the water. In practice, swimmers swim down on the left and back on the right. But in a competition, you want to go straight down the center of the lane to have the fastest time. So especially some of our JV and exhibition type swimmers, we've had some collisions by starting in the water. There's no safe way to dive in the pool except the diving well currently. So another reason why fixing this pool and making the water drop for the water depth at starting blocks would be very important. The next bullet point talks about our deck and how our deck is worn out. We've had people fall, and if you read the responses today, we talked about getting a slip-resistant surface to go over that, which would fix that problem. We also talked about fixing the lighting and the painting in the pool, cost-effective and better visibility for our lifeguards, for our coaching staff, for supervisors in the pool, for some of the different rec programs we offer. And then additionally, our diving board underworkings are from 1974. It's getting to the point where we need to start looking at other options because things are starting to wear out. The main thing right now is the fulcrum. Our custodians are having to grease that more often than is necessary. So the underworkings need to be looked at and be replaced before it gets to the point where we should be.
One thing I want to say about the lighting, and I don't know the year of this, there was a death in a pool in Franklin, I'm not sure of the year. But since then, you'll occasionally read about a death occurring in a pool. Oftentimes, that's because of visual sight in dark spots. And it's really imperative that the lighting in a pool area, because if you're sitting on a lifeguard stand and it's not elevated to the point where you're literally hovering over the pool, which really isn't reasonable or feasible, you've got to have lighting in those areas so that if a child, for example, is in a shallow end at a 4-foot depth or a 3-foot depth, whatever it might be, that pool area has got to be visible from any place on that deck. And that's one thing we don't have right now, and it's one of those things that I don't know if that was the cause of it years ago, and I'm not insinuating that it is, but I'm simply saying that has been an issue that has been brought up for people that have done pool renovations, and the reason for some of those renovations that the lighting and just the brightness of the pool adds to that. So that's one of the reasons. This is not one of those minimal things that, well, let's put new lights in. It really involves safety to a very, very high degree.
We get many compliments in our gym after we did the lighting and the painting in there, and people walk into our pool. It's totally different effect. So
The other thing on the slide with the deck, with all the age groups that utilize that pool, from really little kids to parents with infants that are coming in, there's also a large increase in the number of senior citizens that are using the pool and the exercise classes we have as rehab. You've got people that are walking into that pool that have had knees replaced, they've had back surgeries, and what happens is they walk in and as soon as they see the puddle areas by the entrances to the pools, they get scared, and that doesn't bode well for them. They either don't want to do it, or they start walking and they walk through it and they lose their balance or they slip. That's some of the examples of the deck issues that are out there right now, that there's definitely worn spots that are kind of worn out and they're pitted and they're collecting water.
here's just a slide. So going back to why fix the pool now, we just put some pool facts together about how the pool is the only community pool in Franklin, and it's used by infants to senior citizens to competitive swimmers. Year after year, we have high school kids qualifying for the state meet. And as Brad just mentioned, it's increasingly used by the senior citizens. It's the only pool not in line with the WIAA and NFHS guidelines in the SEC. So again, Wisconsin Interscholastic Athletic Association, National Federation for High Schools, and then SEC is our conference, the Southeast Conference. And I think I mentioned it today in the responses. We're the only school that is not allowed to host the conference meet because we can't dive in the water, and we're in meters instead of yards. And Oak Creek was with us last year, but now they're in line and they can host the conference meet. The pool must be deeper than 4 feet to use starting blocks, so we are not at that depth right now. In the plan we have, we're going to make it 5 feet deep, so just to be extra cautious, and that's also what Oak Creek just did. They made it 5 feet. I talked to the WIAA today, and they have no guidelines, or they can't speak to the fact that maybe in the future they might make it deeper, but right now, if your 5 feet, you're good to go. So that's what we're aiming to do. And then again, high school swimming, we are in yards, not in meters, and that switched over sometime in the 80s in the United States.
Is it just one end that we're,
Yep, we're only on the one end, the starting end. The flip turn end is fine. So then our third slide talks about the timeline, and we're looking at this spring. The estimated cost of everything we talked about is somewhere between $300,000 and $350,000. We're trying to be most cost effective versus looking at a new pool, which is millions of dollars, and something that we'd like to fix our existing pool. And this would be done out of the operating budgets as well as the high school athletic and activity golf outing. And then another reason to do it this spring is because our FIAD units are doing their outdoor units. Summer rec swim lessons will not be affected. They can still operate in summer. And the high school swim guide girls season will be able to start in August. And then it's more time sensitive because Brad would like to get the rec winter, spring guide out to the families so they can start to register.
And we've held off on writing that spring portion of the program because if this is able to be done, which we hope, we'd be able to shorten up the spring session, which ends in May anyways, just the transition from getting out of school to really the middle of June. And so it buys almost a month and a half where there isn't swimming lessons anyways. And like we found this year, a lot of people really only take swimming lessons during the summer. That's when they try to pack in as much swimming as they can do. And the way we had it at Innovative really didn't allow for a lot of people to take swimming lessons. And we heard about it, and we're cognizant of that fact that if this is able to happen, it would have a great impact on the community, being able to take swimming lessons, and senior citizens taking their exercise classes, the open swims. We have a lot of adult people that train very seriously for triathlons. They use the pool every night during swim lessons to get their yardage in. So this timeline works a lot better than if we had to be reactive and try and do it in the summertime.
Well, first of all, I would like to talk about the pool deck bothered me a little bit, but then I realized, because I did it, but then I realized I've been there a long time. It was 20 years ago when I did that pool deck. So, yeah, it's worn out. But what I did want to give you is I gave you a little drawing of the pool. This is the one end. We're only working on one end of the pool. And as you can see, the green area was the original scope of the project. And we had to add that additional 18 feet or so in order to get the proper slope up. That's the red wedge in there, so it's actually expanded a little bit. But basically, they're going to cut it in, and if you can see the deck area to be replaced, so they're actually going to be shortening, and then the deck area to be replaced, and then the portion of the double hatch line, which is proposed pool area, to be shortened by 7 feet 0 inches. So that's, I think it's 0 inches. That's where we're going to go from meters to yards. And then they're cutting along what is an existing control joint in the pool. It runs right along the head of that where it starts to get steep there and drop off into the diving well. And then they're going to cut across on that red line and dig down and replace everything. The other thing I would bring up is the reason you want to go to 5 feet is I remember the time when we had to go, when this started, we had to go from starting blocks to a gutter start. And if you were below 4 feet. Now, if you're below 4 feet, you have to do it in the pool start. So I don't see the safety things getting more lax. I see them getting more, I see it, so 5 feet is the right depth, is my point. And we really don't save any money by shortening it and only going to 4. The reason I would do it now is to mimic, to echo what Brad and everyone else said, is we have an opportunity to do some things with our facilities. And as I look down that list, I probably see something a little different than everybody else. So what I'm seeing is I'm seeing a project that we can do this year, and you can do it within the school year. Another project that I would probably say that is also very important, and I would love to move it forward, would be, say, the playgrounds at either Robinwood or Pleasant View, the hard surface play areas. But you really can't do that during the school year in an elementary school unless you can imagine 500 elementary kids not being able to play outside for the all spring. So that's why I would recommend it be the pool. It's a good process. We did ask the community about it. That's where the 3.5 million came. It was one of the 6 or 7 items that we asked them on a survey back before the referendum. And I think replacing the pool was not something they'd be interested in. So I think it's a good fallback position for us to look at repairing the pool and making it work for what we have. It'll still be 6 lanes instead of 8, but I think it'll be a good pool and it'll meet the community's needs for a long time. And hopefully I won't be replacing the deck again anytime in my career, but that's some of the things we're looking at.
Mark, is that replacement deck, that goes all the way around, right? I know you're just picturing the one side, but the other side over by the lockers, is that gonna be, is that a slip area too? And
Oh, no, this, I'm sorry, this is where you have to re-pour deck in the green.
It will all be.
The whole deck surface is a separate item.
that'll all be addressed, right?
Yes, this is the part, they actually have to cut out everything that's green and red on this. Thanks, I'm sorry, thanks for clear, let me clarify. We're cutting out everything in the green and the red. And then we're replacing it back, and there'll be less pool vessel and more deck, and then we're gonna resurface the whole deck.
And is that really gonna be at a diagonal line like that, or is it?
Yes, because the pool is nearly deep enough in lanes 5 and 6, the 2 closest to the diving well. You see those contour lines? They cut across there? Those are contour lines. This corner over here, for everybody to look at, now I want to say it's about 3 feet 6. It's about 3 feet 6. This corner over here is 4 feet 10 or something, or is it 5 feet? It's almost 5 feet. This corner over here. So you cut it out like that, and then the same thing happens up here. So here, the difference between the green and the white is minimal. Here, it's about 18 inches difference. So that's why you have to slope this up.
And so when it's all done, whether they start in lanes 1 or 5, it's the same depth, the same slope.
Same depth. For the appropriate distance out, which is 20 feet, which is the requirement for WIA. See the lines on the marks on the side? So for 20 feet out, the whole thing will be 5 feet deep. Then we start to slope up the wedge to meet the existing. Okay?
I had a couple questions. Sarah, you had said in one of your responses to the email questions that one of the issues for us hosting larger meets was the deck surface space. And, I mean, we get a little bit more, we get 7 feet more, but this plan doesn't address that at all. I mean, because it's still in the same physical space, right?
Did I talk about the seating?
No. I guess I assumed you meant seating for like the swimmers and things, you know, in between their races, because typically they just kind of
Sit in the corners.
Right.
Yeah, we're just gaining the deck space behind the blocks, but if we're talking about blasting out walls and adding bleachers, then we're adding a lot more cost to it, so.
Okay.
When we do host the big invites, we'll have to have staging out in the hallways and stuff, and other high schools do that when they have limited seating in the pool area. They set up, team camps out in the hallways and classrooms and things, so.
Okay.
We could certainly look into that too.
Okay, so we can still do that.
Yeah.
And then the other question, Mark, this is probably more for you. I yanked out my original survey from a couple of years ago, and I think at that time we had estimated that to upgrade the pool would be closer to $2 million, but I'm assuming that was a much larger scope than this. Do you recall?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Yes. The survey question was really a much larger scope, making it 8 lanes, expanding the diving well. I can't remember what.
Locker rooms were involved
But
in
that
that.
included bumping out walls.
Right.
This one does not.
Okay.
This one is just repairing it in place, I guess you would call it, renovating it in place.
Okay.
Just the physical pool
Right.
area, not
Just
locker
the vessel.
rooms.
No.
Right.
Yeah. And I would also bring up, it's a technical piece, that maybe I'm the only one who cares about it, but by virtue of shortening the pool 7 feet, you're deepening the pool. So your 221,000 gallon pool vessel, if you just deepened and left it the same length, might go up to 240. And now maybe we can't get the flow rates, and now maybe we can't Now maybe we have to replace some of the filter equipment and all, and get the pumps bigger and everything.
The volume.
But by virtue of the fact that we're moving the wall in and going from meters to yards, we can scoop that out, and we're still somewhere around 221,000 gallons of water. Because you have to be able to turn that over in 6 hours. That's the requirement, is every 6 hours, we put 221,000 gallons through our filtering system.
So what is the age of that equipment to do that?
I want to say it's about 8 years old.
Or what's the life of that equipment expected?
Well, the first one lasted 30 years. The first set of equipment lasted about 30. You talk about the filter equipment, Mrs. Lynn?
Correct, yes, whole water circulation, all that part of
Yes.
the tool. And that's, what's the value of that relative to the vessel of the structure?
I'd have to look. I can't remember what it was when we replaced it, but we replaced the filtering system and the pumps, I want to say 8 or 10 years ago. It would have been as part of our regular.
Under 100,000?
Under 100,000, I would say probably.
And,
But the reason I bring up the potential replacing them is, I'm not even sure, if we had to make a new filter, I don't know if it would fit in the room. That one's pretty tight now. And my bigger fear would be the surge tank that's underneath the deck.
and I guess my question would be, by fixing in place, is there new equipment and new technology, new ways of cleaning the water or filtering the water that we're not going to be, that we're kind of locking ourselves out of because we're committing to this pool and this facility?
No, if you did any of that, that all happens in the filtering room. There are UV light systems, there are irradiation systems, none of which I'm comfortable with. There are ozone systems. We use a diatomaceous earth with chlorine. It's perfectly acceptable, it's well managed. It's not the fanciest system, but boy, it works, and it works solid, and it works continuously, and it meets code, and nothing's gonna change with that. But there are different kinds of disinfection systems that we just, at this point. Anything you did would be in that pool filter room. It wouldn't have to do with this.
And I know we're not getting 8 lanes. I'm concerned that, that will still keep us from hosting, because isn't it the minimum?
6 lanes will work. You can still host conference, sectionals. Nobody in our conference could host sectionals because you really need deck space, locker room facilities. It needs to be at like a Schrader Aquatic Center or the one down in the Kenosha area, sports recplex or whatever that is. So we can still host invites with 6 lanes. You don't need 8 lanes to host an invite.
Are we the only pool with 6 lanes then,
No.
in the?
No.
I mean, Oak Creek, you know, five.
Yeah, Oak Creek was odd. It was,
And what do they
And
have
There's
now?
still 5, right?
I think, yeah, they did not increase their lane.
So they have 5
capacity.
also? They have 5?
We have 6.
They have 6, they have
We have
5?
6. I believe they have 5. I don't recall, but.
What about that Greenfield edition, that big one they put on?
They have 8.
Can they host?
That's a whole natatorium, though. They
That's what I
redid it.
mean, that's
Yeah.
a whole,
They
that would be
started from
like our
scratch.
$3.5 million
Right.
proposal or
Yep.
whatever that would
If-
be.
If we wanted that, and we wanted the seating and locker rooms and all of that, yeah.
But that would be on that scale then,
Yeah.
is what,
Yeah.
okay.
When Oak Creek did their pool,
Mm-hmm.
and we're gonna dig the concrete out, correct? When,
Mhm.
Yeah.
when they took their concrete out, they found problems, which cost them an extra $157,000, although they did add some other tiles.
Right.
So if that happens to us, it could happen to us. We could find problems.
It could happen to us. However, what happened to them was first of all, we have a different pool design. It's called a reverse flow. All of our water comes up from the bottom and out over the gutters. That's our flow. Theirs is some of it goes through the main drain, some of it goes through the gutters, and it's all sidewall vents. What happened was, and this was what the guy from Newman Pool told us, the vendor told us, is that the supply lines had become plugged. And he said the pool operators must have been fudging the numbers because we keep really good track of the flow. They must have been fudging the numbers because they never could have made their flow rate with how plugged up those pipes were. So they had to replace all those supply piping. We, on the other hand, I've seen the flow meter myself. It's it's moving along at 650 gallons a minute through that system.
But those are still original pipes?
But
74?
they're PVC. It's a little bit newer pool, so it's PVC, it's not steel. So it's gonna last a long time.
And what is the condition of the vessel, as you say, you know, the walls and the, is there a liner? I don't know, what's the condition of the,
It's a concrete pool with tile floor, tile side, everything's all tile. It's in really good shape. We've had to replace a few tiles here and there, generally on the edges. Yeah, some ladder issues, but the pool vessel itself is in great shape.
And that gets drained every 2 years and gets disinfected, and there's repairs made to that, and that's scheduled into swim lessons and all that over spring break. So every 2 years, that pool is drained down and maintenance is done on the vessel part.
About every 4 years, we regrout the pool, you know, regrout all the tiles, because they'll start to become pitted with all that water movement. And we use an epoxy grout so it holds up. That pool's in amazingly good shape. It really is in beautiful shape.
I was hearing
Just
something,
that you can't, it's just not deep enough.
right, there's, maybe somebody can shed some light on a project that's looking at coming up over on Fleming Park with some of the baseball fields. Was there also a community pool that was talked about being put in there?
They were talking about a community pool, yes. That hasn't
You
gotten
see
any.
if that, I mean, and that will only be the second community pool, but, I mean, is that, anybody can be?
And they're looking at an outdoor facility, more of a, I don't know what you'd call it, a recreational type pool with, you know.
I just had my liaison meeting with the mayor last night, and the county still isn't talking about getting rid of their, you know, they own the land.
Yeah,
They're not even talking about that right now.
okay. So then, with that not really in play, this would be, as indicated, the community pool is what you're talking about.
and the current deck, which, how much is that as part of the total cost estimate? The deck versus the deepening of the
It's
vessel?
somewhere in the neighborhood of about $50,000, but it's about 5,000 square feet of deck. The natatorium itself is about approximately 10,000 square feet, and 5,000 of it's water, you know, surface, and about 5,000 square feet of deck space. And it has to meet certain requirements, slip resistance and all those things. And it has to last at least another 20 years, because I don't want to do it again.
You're saying this would be 20 years? I'm confused on what you just said.
No, what I meant was, is the one now is 20 years old, and I did it.
We did it.
We did it, but I was here to do the project, and so I'm feeling like I've been here too long, I guess is what I'm trying to say. I feel like I've been here a long time. But my point is that this pool deck should hold up for another 20 years, and that's pretty typical. It just gets wear. I mean, people are on it all the time, even with bare feet.
Yeah, you know, above and beyond the athletics and the FIAD and your specialty classes, and there's over 2,000 people that take swimming lessons a year in the rec department. About 1,000 of it happens in the summer. And that's why we're kind of cognizant of the fact that I don't want this project to ever fall in the summer, because we saw last year, plus the fact, you know, we employ at least 11 high school kids in the summer and college kids that were from Franklin that rely on those hours. So, I mean, there's another toll here too, when you look at the number of people that come through that facility, as far as Franklin residents.
Jim, this will be paid for entirely out of this year's budget?
Yes.
Because I know this project wasn't on the delineated list, but through either other projects that either aren't going to get done, or projects that were done but done under budget, or you said some of the golf outing revenue and whatever else, but that's all within the budget that we passed for this year.
Right. It'd be out of maintenance funds, not associated with the delineated list of projects, as well as money from Fund 81, which they spend on facilities that they use in this one. The pool area probably, recreation uses more than the school district does for students, and then some from the golf outing.
So it'd be fair to say that there's no fund balance that needs to be used for this? This is all out of operating?
Right, I wouldn't expect to use any of that, no.
How is that gonna happen? Because this wasn't in the budget.
This wasn't on the list of projects as a project that we would take on this year, but we also have like day-to-day maintenance issues that come up, smaller things, but we did quite a bit of that last year. So I'm assuming that we aren't going to have quite as much this year, So we'll use our, kind of some of the day-to-day maintenance funds for this project so that we can get it done before next year.
Why did we have all that in the budget if we don't need to do it?
We have $10 million worth of projects that are on that list that we need to do. And we can do a piece of it each year, and we have things during the year that break, didn't know they were gonna break. But we've pushed ahead with some of those over the last year to try and get ahead on that.
So we're not gonna do a bunch of things that we may have done so that we can do this?
Right, if there's things we can hold off on, we will hold off on them until next year and get a handle on them at that point. Because of the timing of this, normally for these kinds of projects, most of them are done during the summer. And so it works out well that we start off our budget year, we do the projects, and move on. And it's pretty clean that way. But this one, because we don't want to have it down during the summer, we can't just plan for it next year. That would be the easiest thing to do, but you've heard the problems that would create. So it's being put in this year instead of next year, because it fits. The Phi Ed classes aren't using it. There aren't the lessons going on that there would be during the summer. So it fits in that time, but that time is during this fiscal year and not next year.
Okay, because I have to say that hearing all that we're gonna get for this pool, this sounds like something that makes a lot of sense. It's something that we ought to do. But I'm concerned, just like when we did the concession stand, that kind of came right out of the blue, wasn't planned for in the budgeting process, and it gave me quite a bit of discomfort. And this project is doing the same thing to me. This is, again, something that's just coming out of left field.
Well, no, it's not. As I said, we have looked at this.
Well, yes,
for
it
well-
is.
No, it's not.
It was not
We
discussed
looked
at all
at
in the
this-
budgeting process.
I realize that. I'm simply saying, we have looked at this operationally for over a year. And we bring projects to you. You, as a board member, asked us to bring big projects to you. That's why we're doing it.
We asked
This
you
is
to
not a
come
surprise.
into the budget.
No, you asked us to bring big projects to you, just like the
Correct.
concession stand was. We look at that, and we look at the budget over the course of the year. In this particular case, Fund 81 is part of a project that we can look at to get some money from. And so this isn't a surprise, Alan. This is just an opportunity for us to come forward. School district budgets operate oftentimes with the ability to make adjustments during the course of the year. That's exactly what we do every single year. It does not change. When you become familiar with the school district and budget, you will see that, for example, when we had moss and those kinds of things going out of carpet, we had about $30,000. We didn't have that in the budget either. But you just find the funds, you manipulate the funds a little bit to be able to do that. So this is not a surprise. This was well-planned, well-thought out, and that's why the timing to bring for the board is coming tonight.
I understand it's coming tonight, but it's coming to be spent in this year's budget.
That's right.
This-
But we have the ability in this year's budget to make this work. That's what we're saying. Jim works with the budgets all the time. We take a look at money we can draw from maintenance, from Fund 81. That's what districting budget is all about all the time, of
What-
taking money to make things happen and make things work.
What is Fund 81? Is
That's
that
community service.
the fundraisers that,
No.
No, it's the recreation levy.
okay. And how much of this is coming out of the fundraisers that were done?
The last couple of years, we've made about 30 to 35,000, so we'll use a big chunk of that, depending on how we do.
So, of the 350,000, it's gonna be 50,000, 20,000?
30.
30?
Are these donations that have come through the board? Accepted?
Everything over $500, we write a letter, yeah.
So these have been accumulated over the year and a half?
About, yeah.
How much from Fund 81 are we expecting to use?
Probably about $100,000, 90 or 100,000.
So I guess, Dr. Pats, I heard you say that you were aware of this project, were thinking about doing this project back in June.
I would say we were aware of this project 3 years ago, just like we were aware of the
mean,
concession stand probably 5 years ago.
in terms of preparing to go ahead with it.
Preparing to plan for when we could have an opportunity to do it,
In June.
whenever that came. This particular project, we decided this summer that we were going to bring it before the board for a proposal in the fall of this year. and that's why it's coming before you now.
I guess I fail to understand why it would not have been identified on the project list when it was presented, when the budget was presented to us. It was clearly something you were very much interested in doing, considering doing, and it's missing from the project list.
Well, as was stated earlier, we have $10 million worth of things we can put on the project list, and everything doesn't get on the list, you know, just on the spur of the moment. But there are things we put on the list a week before the list ever comes out, and they change and we take things off the list too. As we told this board a number of times, the list is not magical. It's evolving, it's changing, it changes all the time, and I think it's our responsibility to make sure that whatever goes on that list or whatever we bring before the board is well thought out, is planned for accordingly, and that's what I think this project has done. There was no negligence on this, in this particular project. There was nothing being hid. It was transparent, and that's why it's before you tonight. You can say no to the project.
I
It's
understand
as
that.
simple as that.
You know, I would.
But I think it's our obligation to bring before the board things that we feel this community expects of our school district to do. In this particular case, I think we have some safety issues we need to consider real strong. And from there, you can go to the competition side and those kinds of things. But this isn't a surprise that we put projects on and it comes forward. When, 4 or 5 years ago when we did the gym, that came out of nowhere because all of a sudden we had nails coming out of a floor, yet we were going to continue to go and exercise our basketball games with some kid sliding on the floor and all of a sudden get a nail in his head. I mean, I think there's a little bit of liability that we have to assume sometimes too as we plan. And they don't magically appear at a time period when you can say, well, we'll put it in the budget or whatever. We talk about these things with Jim. We say, when the time comes, how could we do this? We talk about them when we're looking at how much the cost is going to be. You know, I'm not a big fan of using fundraising money to do this, but it's one of the revenue centers that we can use to get some money into this project. But it's, I'm not going to allow people to say that this is not well planned out, because it is. If you don't like it, that's a whole other perspective that the board can certainly take. But this is well planned for. When we talk about the budget part of it, we've got 100,000 things that we can put on that budget that aren't going to appear on a list all the time. And it's really not even feasible to put some of those things on there.
I think as a board, though, it's part of our job to kind of prioritize that list and to evaluate, you know, what you're proposing.
I would disagree with
And
that.
it's hard to evaluate when it comes out of sequence and just pops in there.
Well, it didn't,
Like
doesn't
you
just pop
said,
in.
there's a many things that you could do with this money. Why this one? Why now? Why didn't we have this discussion
It was
in
just
June?
presented to you. But let me say this, in terms of the board prioritizing list, I wouldn't agree with that at all. We run these operations on a daily basis. The board does not have, I'll bet you couldn't go, if we wouldn't have made this presentation, you couldn't have gone on there and told us what's wrong with the pool today. But if you walked in there now, you would see it. It's our responsibility, Linda, to prioritize the needs of the district. That's our job. That's what we're held
I thought
accountable
when
for.
you gave us the list in June and included things in the budget, that was the priority.
It's just part of it. As I said, that changes all the time. It's not a constant list, and we've told the board that numbers of times that list
The
changes
pool
and
did not
evolves.
deteriorate in 6 months.
The pool has been deteriorating for a long time. That pool has been on our list to
it
do
is.
different things to it for many, many years. That pool was on a survey that we asked our community if they wanted a new one. This is nothing new. And I would also echo what Dr. Patz is saying. It isn't our job to list the priorities of what needs to be fixed in this district. We don't know. We're not in the trenches with the people that are there. We're not in these buildings every day. I'm not taking swimming
Debbie,
lessons
they
every
presented
day.
the list that did not
So
include the pool.
That list is a working document, and things
And the pool
break
is
and get
on
broken at all
the second
different
on the back.
times, and that is a
It is on
working
the list.
document.
As a
It is on the
future
list.
item.
And things
Well, the
pop off
future
and
is
on
here
this
then.
future list all the time, though.
You could take at that list, and we could find a lot of things that were listed as future items over the years
You
that
know,
we moved up to the top of the
I
list.
think we can do better with planning. I really do. I have seen other communities and other entities do a better job of presenting things 6 months out. I
Well,
don't think
in
it's
this case, we're well
unreasonable
over-
to expect a better planning.
Well, define that, because what didn't we plan for?
Include it in June, when you presented the budget.
I'm just
It was
simply
not
saying,
even
Linda,
6 months
Linda, it's
ago.
on the list. It's always been on the list. It's right there in front of you. It's on the list. And as far as
I saw
planning
it on
for
the list
it,
as
we're
a
planning
future
on doing
item.
this 6 months from now or whatever, April or May brings to us. So that is good planning. And it's prioritization of what we need. There are times, when we have to look at the construction project that's going on, there are a number of things that we could have said, well, let's put that off. If we would not done the concession stand or restrooms and put those off for another year. If I was a community member not associated with this school, I would have said, you guys are a bunch of idiots. Why didn't you do that when you had construction equipment there, when you had things there? It's sort of the same parallel here. We've got the ability while it's shut down and all those mechanisms in place and the ability to fund it appropriately to do it now. So it is good planning.
We shut down, we could do this any summer. That timing scenario happens every single year. The ability to do it in spring and have it ready, that's not new. There's nothing unique about that this year.
No, but I'm saying because we had to shut it down this year, that allows us to move forward now so that doesn't happen again. To have it 2 years in a row, our community is not going to be happy with it. I'm just saying, we had gotten feedback, Brad, am I correct, that, you know, don't do it to us again because we want a place for our kids to swim. Now, can they swim in the existing facility? You bet. Could certainly do that. But it has been planned for. And we do bring things on in terms of addressing them during the course of the year all the time. It changes weekly. And I think that's our job, to make sure that we monitor that list and bring forward what we think is a good recommendation.
So I would agree that I didn't even look at all the future projects that were on here, and the fact that it's on there, that's fine. But one of the only things that I would like to see tweaked was more information sooner. That would be my only critique, which I guess is similar to what we had with the concession stand. But, you know, I've talked to some people about this, and I think it's a good bang for our buck. I think we're getting value on the project. But that's why I put together all those questions, because the letter that we got wasn't enough, you know, for me. So there was, and I know that a lot of that was going to be at the presentation, but sometimes I would ask that you put yourself in our shoes, in that sometimes it's easier for us to get this information and decipher it and chew on it a little bit, rather than get it at a meeting and then
And
you
Tim,
have
I
to make
agree
a
with you
decision.
100%. And after the concession issue, that's why we're here tonight, to bring this to you. This is the first kick at the cat. If you want to address it at the next board meeting, that's fine if you have other questions or whatever. This was not meant necessarily, it was certainly meant to say, if you think it's a go, let's go, and that helps us timing-wise. Is it imperative that a decision is made tonight? No. But we are doing what the board asked, particularly me, to do. Don't let this happen again in terms of surprises. This isn't the surprise. This is, folks, we're here to make a proposal for you. If you don't address it tonight and you want to address it at the next meeting, or December, or whatever, but our timeline has to be considered as you address it. So I would ask that the board realize that we're doing what you asked us to do. Bring the stuff forward so you can kick it around, ask questions and so on. And if that goes into next month, that's fine.
Well, I know that there's directories that need to be written and some printing deadlines that, when
Sure.
I have my meeting with Brad, so, that I don't know if the rest of the board understands all that. So the timing of this is actually, I think, would be helpful if they got a decision on this sooner rather than later. So, I mean, it's something that we need to do. I don't think the community would support a $3.5 million renovation project, blowing this all, adding this, whatever. We can't do it. But it's one of the things that we had talked about in using the dollars that are available in the budget. You know, the budget got passed with a levy decrease outside the referendum project, and this is something that we can still do in the budget, and that's one of my hot buttons anyway, is to make sure that we keep those numbers in line, so.
Well, our
Well,
intent tonight, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I would like to remind the board, though, that we do not have a final budget yet, and our numbers will be coming in next week. We might have a levy increase. We don't know that. So maybe we shouldn't be spending our money like this, you know, now, without knowing that. It could increase. So I would suggest we don't make a decision tonight without knowing what our final budget is.
We would be able to, we're going to approve either an increase or not, and why would we approve an increase then? They would have to make adjustments on the expenditure side, not on the revenue side necessarily. Wouldn't that be the case?
Well, this would be an adjustment on the expenditure side, wouldn't it?
I understand that, but if the final numbers come in and it looks like there needs to be an increase, and if we don't want that, then there would have to be other adjustments on the expenditure side to keep the levy in line with what we think it's going to be. I understand what you're saying, but, I mean, you can work that on both sides. You don't have to approve an increase just because some of the enrollment numbers come in different.
Yes, I would agree with that. And this would be good option to defer, as we have but done, it seems, for some time now.
And we'll have those numbers by next meeting? Is that what you're saying?
Yes, we will, right?
So, okay.
Is there any other information that you would like us, in addition to what Sarah and Brad and Mark have presented regarding the project, that you need us to bring forward? Because that was the intent, I want to emphasize again, it was the intent to bring this information to you so that you can look at making that decision whenever that was.
So when they walk out of the locker room into the area, that whole deck will have a resurface? Okay.
Slip-resistant surface.
I'm just gonna say, we've been going there for 12 years, and it's, the lighting is horrible. And my daughter's on the other side, and I can't hardly see her swim. And I'm in the bleachers, so I actually get up and move so I can watch her, because when you only have one lifeguard here and one here, my kid's mom, so I'm gonna watch her. So, I think the lighting is terrible.
Should you run into any problems, just, it could happen, then do we have the funding? Say, a pipe problem or some major problem.
If we run into a problem in the project, you mean? If
Yeah,
we
say
went
you do
ahead?
need another 100,000, 150,000, what if you would?
Yeah, what
Right.
kind of contingency have you planned in the number of 350?
Right, we would try and make that work, whatever that was within the budget that we have. If it wasn't going to work, we would take a look at holding off on other expenditures, or we could always look at fund balance at the end of the year, but I would not expect this kind of project, even if we ran into a rather big one like Oak Creek did. I would not see that sending us over budget in total. We would hold back on other things and make that work.
It's not unlike the current project we're under. We probably ran into 3 or 4 instances of bad soil on the new project. That's costing us well over $100,000. And we just had to do some different things and say, because you can't go on without doing it. But to your point, you do have to prepare for the potential that, but as Mark said, PVC pipe hangs around a long time. But if it, and the relative newness of the pumps and filtering and all that works in our favor, certainly.
Well, I'm pleased that we're able to accomplish what you're proposing here without spending, $2 million, because, like Tim said, I think it's kind of a good bang for our buck, so I appreciate that you guys have put this thought into it.
What's the significance to getting an approval tonight or 2 weeks from now? Is there any difference to that?
When does your book go out, Brad?
We've got a deadline right now with all of our instructors to have all of our information by the 18th out to the Type Center. If it comes back after that, then we're having to pay to change pages and to rewrite the guide, which could then change page layout and some of the other stuff. But if we know that we're going to get an answer, we can redo the publication timeline and try and push some crunch down proofing periods for our staff. We've done that in the past.
So the 23rd would be realistic if the board decided to go that way?
After the 23rd, if we had to.
Okay.
Would that mean that nothing would go out on the 18th? You would hold it until after the 23rd, or you just?
We would either save it till then, or we would tell the person doing the page layout that potentially you're gonna either have to fill, because we won't have all the spring lessons, or we will have the spring lessons if this doesn't go. So he can kind of mock up the book up to a certain point for the aquatics, he can work backwards, instead of coming forward, because it's in the beginning. So we can still send him the things that we have in the pages in the back part of the guide, because aquatics falls in the front. So, I mean, we can adapt with him that way. And he's used to some of the things that we've waited on dates for different programs and different things too, so.
So right now, you'd be planning on not having spring lessons, obviously, because
We
this
would
would be
stop
done
that.
in the spring.
Right, we would stop that right before spring break, and then we would start back up again with the summer catalog, with lessons roughly June 15th. And that's roughly the time we start anyways. We're usually done the first or second week of May up through school transitioning out. So this time frame hits really well for not impacting the summer like we did last year, which would be a nightmare again to try and close the pool for another summer. And that's typically when these projects happen, and that's why when we stumbled on the fact that it could happen in the spring, we thought it made sense.
So the 18th is not a hard date, it's just a
It is
desired
for
date?
our instructors. We published this out months ago to all the people that offer classes and co-ops and contract services and things like that. So even if we collect their information by the 18th and we tell our typesetter that we're not gonna do it till the 23rd, we just then have to crunch and potentially may not have a third proof, we only have 2 proofings. The turnaround time on some of this stuff coming back to the post office may have to be moved up or moved back. So, I mean, we can do it. We just need to know, now that this is what's gonna happen so that we can try and work through this with everybody.
I would like to wait. Linda?
Absolutely wait.
Linda? Yeah, I think we can wait. Tim?
If it's not going to affect your timelines and your publications like the talks we had, then that's fine. I still think that if we get a hiccup on where the budget might come in, that they'd be able to make other expenditure adjustments, and I would hope that we would get no surprises to derail the project, because I do think this is something we need to do. So I could go either way tonight.
Wait.
I would echo what Tim said. I think it would be nice if we get it going, but I don't think we can take the chance on the surprises. I think, as I said, I think it's a very worthwhile project, and we ought to seriously consider it.
It doesn't matter what I say at this point. I'm the last one. I would like to move ahead with it tonight.
Okay, thank you. We have consensus to wait then, so we'll put it on the agenda for the next meeting. Okay. Thank you. All right. All right, okay. All right, we will move back then to item 8A, District Health Insurance Update. And we have Dr. Miller and Mr. Milzer.
Well, as you know, we got a chance a year and a half ago to bid out our health insurance for the first time in 20, 25 years, something like that. We got excellent savings on it. We had the Horton Group work on that for us, and we're coming down to the end of that 18-month rate guarantee that we had. So once again, the Horton Group has worked on this for us to go out to bid and see what they could do in the marketplace and bring it back to us as far as pricing to move forward. So we have Kelly Jagelski and Rayanne Beaudry with us from Horton to let us know what they found out.
Good evening, everybody, and thank you for having us. In the interest of what I just heard, we'll apologize for not getting this into your packets a little bit ago, but we've been trying to do as hard dollar negotiations to as much of a possible crunch as we could. And we're not necessarily asking for any action item tonight. We fully plan to come back in 2 weeks and have this be locked down with just some consideration. So this is at this point an update. So I want to just share with you the process, where we're going, and why we're recommending some of the strategies that we are recommending as we move forward, because it's imperative that we get a chance to answer any of your questions with regard to both the process and the time frame that we're looking at. So you have this whole report in a couple of spreadsheets in front of you. I am not going to read this to you. It's kind of a leave behind, but I'll take you through the highlights of it. Obviously, stop me whenever you have any questions, and then we have quite a lot to discuss this evening. So what we've done is we engaged about a month and a half ago in the initial RFP process. So we sent to the market the current plan of benefits that the district has, and we asked for a number of different things. Obviously, there's going to be options that we'll talk about at some point in the future, but we wanted to get the best deal on the current price because that's always an apples-to-apples starting point. And we've been really fortunate to work with the district. May we live in interesting times, I believe is a quote. And the last time we were here was our first opportunity after Act 10, and this is our first opportunity to engage in an RFP process for the school district in the middle of federal health care reform and all of the challenges that brings. So one of the things as you read through this tonight, you're going to see a couple of paragraphs on why we need to move the district back to a July 1st plan renewal date and a pricing differential. And there's a couple of reasons for that. With the federal health care delay for the employer mandate, all of that, the pay or play mandate, all of the different words and terminology that's around that, there are some really hard deadlines that school districts in particular have to work with in terms of looking at how they operate and manage a staff in terms of hours and times of employment. Who is an employee and are they full-time with the new definitions of full-time? School districts actually get less hours to count against a full-time employment. So for pay or play, if you're going to make an appropriate offer of coverage, that has to be done, or you pay a penalty and the penalty is significant. And then the coverage, of course, has to be affordable. So we're gauging all of that. We've done the healthcare reform analysis. And we found in working with our consulting attorneys that there are 3 things that need to take place in order for us to be able to work with the July 1st, 15 deadline, so the 15-16 school year, with any changes in staff that we would need to accommodate, having a good global school year to be able to look at all of this. And those 3 things are, we need your fiscal year to be in line, we need an open enrollment or the offer of coverage to be in line with a particular date, and then we need the insurance renewal to be in line. So we always had 2 out of 3 because your fiscal years never changed to January. We did that to accommodate some plan design changes and when a deductible changes within insurance law. We've never had, the district has not had an open enrollment before, so this is going to be a new accommodation that we have to do in accordance with the law. This summer for 2014 start date, we'll have to offer coverage to all of the current full-time employees that the district considers eligible, but you have to make that an open offer, so people get an opportunity once a year to accept or waive the district's opportunity. And then we've asked for a 6-month and then a future 12-month rate guarantee to bring us back to that July 1st, 2015 date. There's very strategic reasons for this. It will save the district a ton of penalty money and, quite frankly, a lot of staff angst and anxiety over hours and how they line up in terms of their employment and their eligibility for insurance in the future. So we can certainly talk more about that as if anybody's interested in seeing the healthcare reform analysis that we've gone through for the district. I did not bring that tonight because it's sort of a sideline. But when you see the 6-month and the 12-month, so we've got that next 18 months guaranteed with the carriers that we're looking to move forward with. So I think that was really, really important. Also, if you will remember, when we last went to the market, we were able to switch to Humana, and we did that for an 18-month rate guarantee, and we saved the district at that time $1 million over, roughly $1 million, I think it was like $1,036,000 or something along those lines, over what the renewal with WA would have been, and their best offer. We're happy to say tonight that with the next 18-month rate guarantee, we're still going to be able to keep your rates for the current plan pretty consistent with those 2011 rates. So we've been doing a lot of negotiation. There is an increase, small by percentage, but some of that is due to the Affordable Care Act taxes and fees that will have to be paid starting on January 1st. And again, I'm happy to discuss that with anybody who's interested and invested in this. It's a great insomnia read, but we can talk about healthcare reform, for months. But just to make sure that everybody understands that we have undertaken this exercise with Dr. Miller and Mr. Milsner. Dr. Patz has been aware of it. So we've been making sure that you're totally in compliance with this legislation and that we're doing the fiscal and strategic thing for both the district and the employees. So we went to Anthem, Blue Cross Blue Shield, Humana, United Healthcare through an affiliation, which is the Wisconsin Counties Association Group Health Trust. The reason we went in that direction, instead of going direct to United Healthcare, is they have the ability to customize products that are for the public entity. They work within the public entity, and one of the good things about being with a trust, again, is that they disperse your claims experience over their entire large group. And so that's going to help, given the district trends that we've been seeing kind of moving forward here. And the other thing is it allows some flexibility, and the trust doesn't have quite the compliance expense issues with the Affordable Care Act. So because it's a self-funded VEBA, they have some flexibility to manage that. WA would have the same thing. We did go to them. They did present a proposal. Quite frankly, for 12 months, their proposal was very competitive. One of the reasons we are not asking the district for further consideration on the WEA trust, and I think this is important, you're going to see the pros and cons as you move through the report on your own, but they are not the same trust that they used to be. WEA has, over the last couple of years, invested in a total public entity offering, and they've become heavily, heavily invested in the state plan. Nothing's wrong with that strategy, but they've become much more like a real insurance company, for lack of a better term. What that gives them is the ability to market to other entities besides school districts and be a little bit more respected and have a little bit more integrity and truth in that space. What it takes away from them, though, which would be really important to our constituency here at the district, our employees and plan participants, is it takes away their ability to be comfortable in their old shoes. So it's a new carrier, but it would be very much like operating with Humana in an old house. And we just didn't feel that they were competitive enough or flexible enough that that move going backwards would feel real enough to make our employees happy. So we've given you the pros and cons behind that decision. We think that you'll appreciate where we've come after you have a chance to evaluate that yourself. And then WPS has recently come back into the market with a renewed relationship with Aurora, so they were absolutely up and available for consideration. They also, at this point, have given us only a 12-month and an 18-month, which isn't quite as competitive. It's about $100,000 over our two most competitive bids. On the dental, which we'll also talk about very briefly tonight, every carrier that we went to is competitive against the Humana rates. Basically, we went to Humana 18 months ago for our dental because we got a 2% decrease in the medical rates. So it was very much worth it. We may have paid an extra $50,000 on dental, but we saved, a couple $100,000 on the medical premium over time. So it was a worthwhile trade. We all kind of knew it, but they did match the benefits that we had. So we're going to be recommending a change to Delta Dental for a 2-year rate guarantee, should we choose to do that, and we're going to have a $53,000 roughly savings over current. So that move is absolutely in the ballpark. So as I said, you're going to see these pros and cons. What we're going to ask you to consider then tonight is on the spreadsheets. I'm going to kind of walk you through this. We tried to keep this simple because spreadsheets for health insurance can get a little bit tedious and a little bit crazy. So hopefully this makes sense and we can follow through. When you look through the report, you're going to see that initial proposals from all of these carriers were in the 8 to almost 20% range. When they figured out that they had really legitimate competition, we got down to suddenly in the 4% to 8% range. So the initial proposal out of the chute from Humana was a 10.77% renewal on a 12-month basis. So that would have been calendar year 2014. We then started to work with this flexible sharing. We always, with the incumbent, will share some competitive information. We tell them we're not playing at Miller Park, we're playing at, at Franklin, at Fleming, and we want to make sure that we're all starting in the same space. So you've got to rethink your underwriting proposal. We've gathered some additional information on some of our large claimants. We walked them through. They came up with an 18-month rate guarantee of 7.5. WCA came up with 18 months, and you're going to see the 18 months at the end of each one of these in different colors. So the Humana's the dark blue. 18 months was 7.5% over current for that entire time frame. WCA was 7.07 over current. WEA only gave us a 12-month rate, and then WPS at the very end gave us an 18-month at 6.67. What WPS has not done at this point in time was give us the 6-month, 12-month breakdown, which both Humana and WCA have done. That allows us to save an additional amount of money because the 6-month is lower, the additional 12 months then is lower, so the blend comes in smaller, if that makes sense. So what we're going to be looking at as a bottom line, for lack of a better term, is for 18 months, we're looking at spending roughly either 9.956577 with Humana, 9.772698 with WCA. And those are the two that, when you read through the report, you're going to see have the most realistic chances of success. Obviously, the WCA Group Health Trust at this point in time is $180,000 less. We feel that from a really deep dive position here, that probably both of these carriers are pretty near their bottom line. No one likes to lose business. I mean, this is not the first negotiation. We got the last WCA numbers at about 10:30 this morning. We've been doing this until the wire. I actually called the Aegis Corporation, who forwards these quotes, and said, we're gonna hit send in 5 minutes. If it's not in, you're not included. And we waited an extra 20 so we could get these numbers in, because we knew that they were trying to be competitive and earn your business and earn your trust. We never ask clients to move for 1 year, because everybody can buy your business for a 1-year deal. Then we want that not to exceed, or we want that longer time frame, so we have a good chunk of their claims experience. Do we think Humana might possibly make a business decision to do something more aggressive to retain your business? Honestly, it would be a business decision at this point. Your experience does not justify it. It's always a little bit easier for a new carrier coming in, which we saw with Humana the last time, to come in a little bit more aggressively, because they haven't paid those old claims. They don't have as much of a sense of what's ongoing, what have they lost money on, what didn't they reinsure or envision happening when they took the case over. So, you know, I would tell you at this point it would be a business decision strictly being utilized to retain your business. So I feel that these are pretty good, solid numbers for our consideration. Both companies have pros, both companies have, you know, negatives. Obviously, there's a cost to move, but that doesn't mean that it's not a good investment. WCA is underwritten by the parent company of United Healthcare, UMR. It's good networks, very solid, aggressive discounting. It's broader than we have with Humana. We don't have the 2 networks, one narrow, one broad, for employees to choose from, so the employees gain some things here. They will match plan benefits down to and including matching the tiers prescription drugs are on. No other carrier can do that. So there's some real positives to it. Having said that, there's a cost to move. We know what we've got with Humana. We've got a pretty good package deal. So either one of these, I think, are definitely within the ballpark, but we're talking about a $10,000 a month savings over 18 months, and that's not chump change. And I can definitely appreciate that. Given another $53,000 to $60,000 with the dental, we're in a good space here. So I'm sorry it's a surprise, but I think that we've done a lot of really good work together with the partnership here at the district, and we feel pretty confident with this proposal this evening.
Just one question. So what is there's a 12-month here and a 12-month there. What is the difference?
12 months is just the first 12 months is just the calendar year. So if they came in and gave us an annual renewal for January 1 through 12/31.
But you're not recommending.
Pardon me?
You're not recommending even considering that?
No. I like the longest period of time at the lowest possible conglomeration of rates. So both of those are a little bit higher than we'd be paying for that first 6 months, and it really helps us flex the second 12. And we definitely need to get back to that July date. And we can't do it on January 1 of 15. We've got to do it now. We got to catch that cycle for the Affordable Care Act. That's really important. The penalties could be huge.
I have a question. Maybe it's in the packet here with your breakdown, but there's no information on here with regard to how the plan looks, plan design.
And we can absolutely get that to you. We can send it to the district tomorrow, and then have them send it out. We were trying to not keep the spreadsheets really busy. We actually could not print the PDFs because it started to get really large across the Excel. We have that. Right now, it's the current plan with these rates. And we have some decrements if we wanted to make plan changes, but we wanted to start you out on the path of, are we at least on the 18-month strategy, 6 and 12? And, you know, how do we want to look at this? Because if there's additional budgetary issues that we need to concern ourselves with, we wanted to start negotiations with only the people that, you know, if we want to make sure
Right.
that the board is comfortable with the direction
I
we've
think
set.
the 18 months makes sense, breaking it up into 6 and 12 makes sense. But I would thought it was pretty clear that the last time we did this, we made the migration, so the plan design was the same as it was, minimize the headache, everyone all
issues.
worrying about it, how it's gonna work out with Act 10, and with this next time around, that was our trigger, that was our mechanism. Now we can look at, okay, now we're gonna have to make some plan design changes, because you're talking about a pretty significant, not about significant, that word's relative, but an increase over what we're talking about. We saved a bunch of money last time, now not so much. But these numbers are at the plan the way it is.
Right.
And I guess I would also ask, where do we sit with this Cadillac tax that's coming on the road? Are we gonna be within that range of, because the deductibles are pretty low. The max out-of-pocket's pretty low. How does that rate with the Cadillac tax?
Well, all I can share with you is what we know today.
Right.
And the Cadillac tax, obviously, we would have to make some pretty significant adjustments to any plan, and quite frankly, the exchanges are over the Cadillac tax allotment. So it's interesting to see where costs have gone. If you are paying, for example, the Silver plan, which is a low average program on the exchange, is at a 22.7, and the Cadillac tax starts at 20,004 in 2018. So for a for a family of four paying full price with no tax subsidy, they're already at the Cadillac tax for the second lowest plan, which is a $2,000 single deductible, $4,000 family, 70/30 coverage in network.
In the exchange.
In the
they're at the
exchange.
Cadillac plan.
Yeah. The bronze plan, what people don't know, the bronze plan is a $5,000 single deductible and a $12,700 family out of pocket, not premium, out of pocket. And it's 60/40 coinsurance. So the Affordable Care Act is already, because again, no pre-existing conditions, no age gender rating, everything's got to have all the essential benefits. So there's some challenges with the Cadillac tax. The think tanks that we listen to, the American Benefit Council, all of these folks, think that that's going to be probably something that is completely revamped. Whether it's that employees get a taxable income of the premium that the employer pays on their behalf, but it's not going to be that 40% tax. They think they're going to turn it into some kind of an income tax, take away Section 125 ability to pre-tax your premium. So all of the think tanks are looking at the other way for them to get the same amount of tax revenue, because they don't want to see everybody gutting their plan below the levels that they said you could. So that is obviously a challenge for the future. It starts in 2018, so for us it would be the 18-19 school year where we'd have to concern ourselves with the Cadillac tax as just an entity right now if it stays the way it's written. On that note though, when we come back in 2 weeks, no surprises this time, we'll have it out to you ahead of time. We'll show you the current plan and the decrements, but we wanted to make sure we were starting with a strategy that the board could agree on, and then we'll give you the menu. We can come and discuss it. The challenge will be, what we're going to need by the end of the month, if you will, is we're going to need to know if we're moving or changing carriers, because we would want to start all those electronic transfers, the accumulators, the different things that the carrier needs to get started, so people will have ID cards in their hands. The plan design itself for January 1, we have a little flexibility in timing for changing that, so the board would have more time to consider that particular issue.
I'd be very interested to see how these numbers change if we start looking at changing the plan design. I mean,
Sure.
I think, I personally would not be comfortable in approving this carrier with no change in the plan design. I think we need to look at those triggers to help save some money in the district. That's my
If I
view.
recall, the family plan had a $200 deductible. So that's what this is?
Yes.
Yeah.
And
That's a load.
no one's debating that we haven't talked about this before, or that we, but again, this is an update to share with you where we've gone. We know where we're gonna be, we know at this point what our starting point with either of these carriers are gonna be. So we wanted to get to that lowest possible equation, because if you already sell you sell the gold bullion before you know what the price of silver was gonna be, you're gonna lose money. So we wanted to just make sure that we were all on the same page, that yes, the starting point makes sense, but now we got to come off of that. Now we have to look for additional savings.
Did we look at self-insurance at all?
We did look at self-insurance, and what I like about both of the carriers that we're looking at continuing with is that we would have an opportunity to evaluate their network discounting as we move forward. Right now, I can tell you that the district's trend is not looking good month over month. I know that you and I have talked about this in the past, and you understand what a medical loss ratio is. In the first 12 months of the contract with Humana, the district was enjoying approximately about an 85% loss ratio. For every dollar you paid in, they were paying 85 cents out in claims, which health insurance carriers consider to be break even. In the last 4 months, and that's about all we have data for, we can reasonably tell you that that loss ratio has creeped up to very much close to 100%. When you start adding the taxes and fees for healthcare reform, which do start in January no matter what we do, that's $63 per belly button on the plan per year. we have a couple thousand people on the plan, individuals on the plan, that's gonna be some significant cost. The insurance carriers have to pay that when you're fully insured. So they're taking care of that for you. So we would have been looking at probably a 3 to 6% increase just with healthcare reform, and then you put on top their administration and pricing. I will tell you that with all the chaos that's going on, considering where we're looking to be in terms of a percentage, I would not strongly recommend self-funding at this time.
How are the other, I know one of the things we talked about is trying to keep what we're offering similar to what is out there in terms of our other employers in the area for our employees. What are they doing? What are you seeing with their renewals?
You know, there's right now a ton of, I think, different strategies, and all of them have some really good theory behind them. What we're seeing a lot in the private sector, to stress specifically private entity, is they're typically going to higher deductibles, lower premium contributions. So as a percentage, total out of pocket, they're trying to keep relatively the same. And there's a huge strategy right now. You know, one of the things that has never happened before, there's always been a lot of discussion about people being able to encourage somebody to go off on their spouse's plan, as an example, or people to take a spouse's plan when that was available to them. Now every person can make a decision as to what's affordable, or even if they want to have health insurance. I can go off the plan, and if I'm low income or my household is low income, I just pay the tax fine and not worry about, I can self-fund or, you know, be eligible for Medicaid, or there's a whole lot of different issues right now. So we have to be careful while we're looking to save expense, that we don't deteriorate the revenue into the plan and mix up the loss ratio. So the private sector is looking at that. So they may be going to 1,000, 2,000, or even high deductible plans that coordinate with health savings accounts, but they're lowering the premium contribution for the individuals, even in making it maybe very close to no cost to the employee, but not funding an HSA, as an example. We're seeing a lot of that. What we're seeing in the public entity, deductibles are absolutely creeping up. I think the average right now, I would say, is probably a $500 single, a $1,000 family. A lot of people are clinging desperately to the 100% coinsurance because of the changes, again, in affordable care. Starting in the 2015 plan year, we have to have every copayment counts against the out-of-pocket maximum. So if you have a deductible at $1,000 and then 100%, all those office visit copays and prescription drug copays count against that $1,000. So that's when public entities are going to look at going to 90% coinsurance, for an example. So we're seeing people go higher on the deductibles, changing up the copayments in a pretty significant way, but not trying to get rid of the 100% coinsurance. And manage to flat or very close to flat. I think most of your counterparts have been budgeting in the 3 to 5% range and making plan design changes to come within that budget.
Jim, did we have in the budget the roughly 7% increase?
The increase we're looking at here is for 18 months, and our budget only takes into account 6 months of this.
Okay.
So we had 5% in our budget to handle that 6 months, because we weren't sure coming off of an 18-month guarantee what would happen.
And the number actually for, if you were to split it up between the 6 and the 12, that first
Right.
6, we're looking at a 3.5%.
Or a 2.34.
Or a 2.34.
Right.
And that's with the plan design the way it is now.
Correct.
So understanding that those gaps may be the same, but if we raise deductibles and the like,
Right.
the overall premiums will go down. So
Correct.
your percentage increase, you may actually even, you will be even better, in better shape than the 5 what we have on here.
Any other questions? Thank you so much.
Thank you.
We'll see you again.
So we will see you next time and you'll have the stuff early. Our apologies.
Why do you keep looking at me?
Thank you. Okay. Item HC, Superintendent's Report, Dr. Pat.
Regarding the construction, it's really going well. If you've been by there, you can see that we have the decking on. Now they put up roof trusses today on the new classroom addition. Panels for the Performing Arts Center are scheduled to go up next week, and additional footings for some of those areas are also being taken care of, so it's going to pop up pretty quick. Regarding the concession and restroom renovation that we did, actually building that we did, last weekend was our first chance of using that. It was operational, everything worked, the toilets flushed, the water ran, the lights went on, and we had a lot of positive comments about it. That continues to be work. They'll be putting the panels up around the upper facade. The roofing is still being finished, some lighting. Today they were doing the grading of the areas that were, if you saw, there were dirt piles and gravel and all those kinds of things. And we were running around Friday night just making little notes of things that we need to do as far in terms of fencing. And I would tell the board that one of the things we need to look at, that we talked with the principals and so on, is the elementary and middle school student population. And quite honestly, the babysitting service that we're providing, it has gotten out of hand. We've gotten a lot of complaints from parents about why are these kids running around, bumping into me, knocking my coffee off. They tipped over garbage cans. And it's middle school kids were actually a little bit better this week with the elementaries. And so we, as a district, we're going to be looking at that. And we're probably going to send something as we look at next year of a plan to put in place. Many districts will locate bleachers in the end zones and say, there's where your kids sit, and that's where they stay. And I don't know that we're going to do that. I'm just saying we have to look at something because it is disruptive. It got so crowded, and there was a large crowd, obviously, but even our ticket takers were cramped and almost being pushed out the gate because those kids would be, just edging their way up a little bit, and it got uncomfortable for a lot of people. So, we want the people to come. We want them to have a good time, but if you're there, you're supposed to be there to watch a game. And if we can find maybe an area where they're not so intrusive on everybody, it'll work out well, and we want the kids to have fun, but there comes that gray area that we got to try to find a balance on how we can do that. So all those things will be in place hopefully by the 18th for the ribbon cutting ceremony. That'll be just a brief ceremony, cut a ribbon, acknowledge that we've done something, pretty nice. And it was funny, we even had some people that continued to use the outdoor porta potties because they thought they didn't recognize the building. They went outside, and we had lights and everything on, but they went outside. Anyway, so, but it went well. So overall, that project aside, the high school project is going very well. And we've had a few glitches. A fire alarm went off because some dust got into one of the sensors, and that's going to happen. I mean, that happens when there was no construction in our tech ed areas. We had, those kinds of things go off, so.
Just a question on the concession stand. So are there going to be, because the windows where they sell out of, there's going to be something that pulls down there, right? Or
Yeah, those are sliding
okay.
utility doors
All
or
right.
whatever you want to call it.
They're
Yeah.
not in yet, though, but they're...
Yeah, I think they started putting the brackets in for those today.
Okay.
But they will be in, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was
And
wondering about that.
regarding the Sabre Stadium project, I didn't get an update from Dave Bartles this week. We have a meeting scheduled for next week. I know that right now their main emphasis is contacting. They have a large group of lists of potential donors, businesses and so on that they want to contact to see if there can be some donations. I think I mentioned in one of the updates with theirs. I guess it's about up to $25,000 now in terms of donated money. And then there's an event scheduled for the 24th, I believe it is, at Tuckaway. Just sort of a hors d'oeuvres type of thing to bring some of the people that are capable of making larger donations in the community to bring there to go over, review it, and so on and so forth, and sort of highlight it. So they're working very hard at that, and so we'll have to get going on that pretty quick because there will have to be a decision made, in not too long a time, but it's going very well from what I understand. So that's about it.
Thank you.
I have a question.
Oh, sure.
Of course, it's my question night tonight, apparently. So the $1 million, that's the threshold, that's the goal by December 1st.
Actually, probably a little higher than that,
A
Tim.
little higher than that?
Yeah.
Okay, because I know the total project, we're looking at about 3.5 roughly is what they're talking.
Well, that would be with everything. They brought this down to just the first phase is just the track and the field.
Okay.
And possibly the lights, just depending on bids and so on and so forth, but track and field for sure.
Okay, so that wouldn't be 3.5.
That'd be
3.5 is the
1.9.
bleachers and the press box and the lights and the
There's,
field.
yeah,
and
there's a
track,
temporary,
everything.
there's a softball field that's designed, but we don't know if the DNR is going to let us do
Okay.
that, and, so there's some cosmetic things. But,
Okay.
yeah, so that's getting up there, but they're looking at, I would say 1.9 million is what we're looking at, and as far as what they need to come up with to begin the project, so, and then if they came in December and said, we've got $1.5 million, it would, they would have to come before the board, first of all, for you to authorize moving forward, and then they would do that with the assumption that the other 400,000 or whatever is going to be coming in and that kind of thing.
And then switching gears to the concession stand, they were selling the tickets out of the building, and then you get your ticket, and then you have to go to the two people that are standing by the garbage can, and then they stamp your hands. Is, Why are those two separate steps? Why not maybe just do the transaction, stamp your hand, and then you're done, and eliminate the bottleneck at the garbage can? I don't know if I'm missing
Yeah.
something, or is that something we could?
No, it's a good question, and we looked at that. It used to be they would do that, rip the ticket in half, give them half a ticket, and then when they come back, if they wanted to leave, certain people, well, first of all, we don't let kids leave and come back in.
Right.
So we were trying to look at what's the most convenient way this time to do it. Well, these tickets happen to have a little coupon on them that people wanted to have for, I don't know if it was for Subway or whatever it was, so there was a big issue that they wanted to have half the ticket back. But I think it's something we could look at in terms of, since we have two people there, but the selling gets pretty fierce, but we can stamp them right there and then they walk in. But, if they stamp them there and walk in, it's just a matter of looking at the stamp.
Yeah, you still have to have somebody to make sure that there's a hand stamp.
Right, so we need a body there, so.
Right.
And, oftentimes it's not unlike many people to create a little stamp with a magic marker to come to games. You'd be surprised how many people do that.
Yeah.
And, because nobody really takes a close look at it, and then they slide right by. Well, if they have a ticket and that, then it makes it a little bit.
That's true, okay.
So we're looking at all those things. The ticket takers, we asked them, take a look at your evening, how did it go, what should we do different? And they had lots of ideas.
And there were a lot of kids there.
Yeah.
And I think it was Greendale that sets up the bleachers, unless it was Oak Creek, I was thinking were.
A lot of districts do
Kinda-
it that way.
Yeah, but there, it was traversing the maze of little ones to get to where you had to go.
Thank you. And we have item 8E, the budget process. Oh, I'm sorry, here we go again. 8D, Human Resources Report. Dr. Miller.
We have concluded our negotiations with the FEA for the 2013 and 2014 wage agreement, and I would like to propose that the board ratify this wage agreement for an increase of 2.07% on total base wage for that period of time, July 1, 2013 to June 30th, 2014.
Thank you. I'm looking for a motion to ratify the Franklin Education Association and Franklin School Board 2013-2014 wage agreement that provides a 2.07% increase in the total base wage for the contract period July 1, 2013 through June 30, 2014 pursuant to Wisconsin Statute 111.70. Do I hear that motion?
I would make that motion.
Motion by Mrs. Larson. Is there a second?
Second?
Second by Mrs. Klein. Is there any discussion? Can I ask, why was this one put off?
The association had some difficulty putting their executive board together for meetings towards the end of last school year.
Okay. Thank you. Any other discussion? May we have a roll call, please? Mrs. Schleter?
Sure. Mrs. Witkowski?
Aye.
Mr. Nielsen?
Aye.
Mrs. Evans?
Aye.
Mr. Alexandrovich?
Aye.
Mrs. Klein?
Aye.
Mrs. Larson?
Aye.
And I say yes.
Thank you. Motion carries. And now we have 8E, Budget Process Review Discussion, and I'll call on Mr. Alexandrovich.
Thank you. Linda and I have been passing emails back and forth, telephone calls, and we wrapped up this presentation just this afternoon. So I made copies. And the budget discussion points are basically four things that we thought we could discuss as possible improvements. A budget timeline, better planning for capital projects, more information, and a fund balance policy. Budget timeline, we looked at the 2011, 2012 timeline, compared it to the 2013 timeline, and we found that certain things had been deleted, such as board review of the budget timeline, review district goals, and budget listening sessions with the community. And we thought that if we had a timeline that wasn't tied to dates, but it was tied to board meetings, for example, the estimated budget parameters by the first board meeting in December. That's not what I'm recommending, it's just as an example, then the timeline would not have to be rewritten year after year. you just follow the same timeline. By this first board meeting in December, by the third board meeting in March, whatever, or second board meeting in March, whatever, we would expect certain things to fall in line. And I think sometimes when we rewrite a timeline, things just get missed, and then we wouldn't have to do that anymore. We should probably review the timeline between those 2 years and determine what items we want back in there, or don't we want back in there. Better planning for capital projects. We looked at the 13, 14 capital projects, and I noted that there were 8 of 10 that were not on any list at all. That was explained because the middle school was expected that referendum would pass, so these things weren't out there as specific items to be done. When it didn't pass, there are things that we had to get into. The pool caught me by surprise, and it's a personal thing, because from all the discussion, it sounds like it didn't catch everybody by surprise. Some people knew about it, but again, if you've got a plan that has enough detail that these things are laid out, then no one's surprised. So we mentioned the capital projects, although that thing has been talked about. Capital projects are going to come up earlier. The pool did. I think we're moving in the right direction there. More information. Some of the questions that, as we look at the budget, we kind of threw out there. What is the impact of open enrollment? What is the cost benefit? How do we compare with other districts with the cost per pupil in areas like transportation, technology, facilities, student record keeping, guidance, direct teacher time? Can these be charted? How do these change over time? The things that you don't track, you don't necessarily improve. And maybe all of this is being done, but from a board standpoint, I haven't seen it, and in discussing with Linda, she hasn't either. Little things like when total spending per student dropped 516, 10, what were the drivers? And that wasn't laid out. Linda, you thought that was mostly driven by Act 10.
I would guess it would have
That'd
been.
be my guess, too.
And I'd like to see, and I presented this one, when the budget information is presented, could we have a schedule of detail that makes up line items over a certain amount? And I don't know what that amount is. Is that $250,000? Is it $1 million? But at what point do we get more information? We do have copies of the budget behind these first 2 pages where some things are laid out, and we wrote down schedule, like purchase services in the elementary classroom, what schedule of contracts, and the items over $300, that's over $1 million. Is there anything that we'd be interested in knowing what makes that up? Looking for full-time equivalents next to salaries. Just additional information, and that's the area we're looking at, more information. Should we be presented with items making up our benefit cost in the budget? Do we need a schedule for something like that? That was a question that I had, and from what we've just been presented here, it looks like we're actually going to get that kind of information. The alternative high school education program, what is the budget amount? That is, if you looked at those pages, there's, that's under the middle and high school classes, and that area was circled, and we asked how much. And then, fund balance policy. Our fund balance is over $20 million. How large will we allow this to grow? How do we correct the situation if we go beyond whatever the desired balance is? If there is spending or growth in the fund balance, spending out of the fund balance, growth to the fund balance, what board involvement should there be? And I think we need a policy on how we're gonna handle the fund balance. I guess if we go to the past, it wasn't a problem, just didn't have one. The fund balance was developed so that we wouldn't have to borrow money. I mean, this is this great thing that we've been able to do, and now it's come to a point where should we be talking about it? Where should this be going? Is it where we want it, or do we want more? So these are all of our discussion items that we came up with that we thought we'd like to see implemented in the budget process. A little more information. Does anybody have any questions? I know this is coming up kind of last minute. I made the copies at work just before I ran out, so sorry.
And I guess I'd like to add a little bit, and I think we have, some of the information is included in our packet. If you were to pull open the budget document and look at, there is some historical financial information, Jim, that you have pulled together regarding spending per student and equalized value, and I would just suggest, or would like to see us maybe discuss this in February, March, and review kind of where we are and what's happened and where you think that might be going. And also, I think it would be good to discuss enrollment projections. I know, and open enrollment and how that drives the aid formula and the growth in revenue. We could have that discussion February, March, and maybe even talk about how we think wages might change. Again, an early discussion, not something that comes later. I just want to avoid having the budget come to us in May or June without any previous discussion targeted at the budget. I know you'll tell us that we approve curriculum along the way, or we do these things along the way, but it might, I think, more focused discussion, a couple of meetings in February, March. And this is not something that hasn't been part of the timeline before. I don't know, it kind of got dropped or it didn't happen. So I think we need to bring that back. So I don't think there's anything radical here. Nothing, except some of the information. Also, you provide us with information from the departments that are an appendice that's in the budget book right now. Discussion on what's changing and what's driving some of the cost. If we could again have that information earlier, then we could just, share the information. That wouldn't be something that came at us at the end. We would know that in advance. And we would hear the same thing. So those are, I think that we can improve our process. I know we feel we have a good process, and we can improve it.
So just have discussions that relate to the budget more frequently than just the one time a year we talk about it to approve it later.
Correct, a couple more times, and again, earlier in the process.
So we had talked about it a few meetings ago about bringing up some of that with the open enrollment and discussions of when those deadlines are. And so I think that's something that we're looking at doing, right?
Does anybody have any thoughts on our thoughts? Positive, negative?
No, I like the idea of just having a more generic timeline that's, instead of being tied to dates, it's just reusable each year and, first meeting, or even just month, first or second meeting it could be. to give us more flexibility. I think that would work well.
Jim, when you start talking about the budget, when you start formulating it with administrators and Dr. Pats, that's in February or sooner?
No, it'd be in December.
December.
We would start. Yeah, a lot of things on that budget timeline list are internal things that we do, and that's where those dates come from. That's when I want the information. That's when we're going to have the information. And I did provide Ms. Witkowski a list of the things that would actually come to the board in the future. And one of those was that meeting in about March to talk about the assumptions. You know, what assumptions are we making? What do we see happening? Those kinds of things. We did miss it this year. You know, we were in the middle of planning for the referendum and the buildings and all of that, and it just got out of hand, and we didn't get to it. So I apologize for that, but we definitely want to do that in the future so that we can talk about those things.
So we could just get together and start discussing earlier, just bringing.
Right. I chose March because we would want to have some idea of what's going on in the buildings and what the plans are so that we can put those assumptions together and we have a little better idea before we have the discussion.
The topics that Jim was talking about, if you go on board docs, it was just put on there today in the library. You'll find out those topics are listed in the board calendar. There's a new one. It's tentative, and it's flexible, and it's changeable. But just so you know, the topics that Jim is referring to have been put on there. Linda, I think we had, for some reason, what was that regarding the audit, Megan? We looked at that in January versus, because we had some other things on there that were.
At Jim's request, the audit report had typically, I think, been in February, correct? And on the document you'll find on board docs, we had moved it to January to provide the information sooner.
That work?
I asked for December, but I guess December was full and January
We
was.
talked about that.
Yeah, one or the other one was full. so.
Yeah, we talked about that because typically 6 months after you close your year, you should be looking at your audit. So that's why December seemed to be, but if it's early January, I guess we can.
So it's under finance, documents, budget, timeline, is that what you're referring to,
see
Steve?
what you're
No.
saying.
It's under board
calendar.
calendar. It's board report schedule.
Board calendar, okay, thank you.
I see what you're saying, Jim. A lot of these tasks are more internal tasks. Maybe it would be clearer for board members if we indicated somehow which ones need, board input or board action. I don't know, and then in between those times, you guys are gonna be having stuff that you work on, and it might be nice for us to know what some of that stuff is, but a lot of these are internal things, staffing plan developed, and you guys do that.
Yeah, I think the one that's out there now just has a couple of things during the year that we actually are coming to the board and talking about. So that may be the one to look at when you're saying, okay, what's the next time that we do something?
Right.
I don't know, that was to provide more information, but maybe it's confusing.
I think the one thing under the more information that I would just like to make a comment on where it says, how do we compare with other districts? And I had talked with Linda about this today. That's really a time consumption and a really vague issue for us because every district is so different. We could accumulate data from many districts and it would make sense to us because it's not the same. The number of buses, for example, in transportation, you could go to certain districts that have much more of certain technology or they're at a different place. And so the hours it takes to accumulate that data, several years ago, a board member once said, whatever we do, it should have value to it. What are we doing this for? And if it's just so that we accumulate data and have a report to look at, is that the intent, or does it really have value in terms of we're going to make a decision based on this data? Is it critical for us to have that kind of thing? So that's what we look at internally, on the reports and things that we do. And so when I look at this list right here in terms of facilities, there isn't a facility that's comparable to us anywhere, probably in the country. So, for us to accumulate data on that as far as relative facilities or how much facilities, you could say, well, let's look at your energy consumption, for example. It still wouldn't have any meaning because it's so dramatically different. So I bring that to your attention because I want us to not waste time getting up information that doesn't really have value. But I think what you're mentioning here, Alan, there's some good stuff in here. And we can, I think I'd like to bring this back to our directors and so on and have the discussion for, and it's the first time we've ever seen this too, so this is a surprise to us. But I think it's mainly important for us to say, okay, how can we make this work? The other thing about this, one of the ones that you hit on here as far as the open enrollment one, that I think is one of those areas where I think is really important for us all to have a handle on. Because I bet in the last week or so, I've got a number of phone calls regarding the boundary disputes, and every single question asks me about open enrollment. And it's hard to get into a discussion in terms of, well, what does an open enrollment student bring in terms of dollars? Because people look at that and they look at how many, but they forget we also have some that are going out too. So there's a two-way street there, and I think it would be very beneficial. That would be a specific example that I think would have great value for us to have a discussion on, to know, here's what it is, here's what the dollars are, here's the impact it has on us, and here's why we have to pay attention to it.
And I would just confirm that, I would respectfully request that you select these carefully in terms of what you really feel you will learn from that, because they are very time intensive. And if we do a lot of data gathering from other districts, and I've done this, it takes an enormous amount of time. People don't get back to you, they don't respond, and frankly, we don't have the personnel to do it. The existing personnel will have to not do something that they currently do now to invest in gathering data from other districts. So I just am asking that respectfully you consider those requests and the amount of personnel we have to fulfill those requests. At least have some dialogue with us about the feasibility of getting that work done within the scope of things that we already have to do. So I just have to insert that, because it is very, very time consuming.
I wholeheartedly agree. I think that if, you have to look at everything with a cost-benefit analysis. And if the cost is going to outweigh any benefit, you shouldn't do it. Some of these things, if we don't attempt to get some information, I don't know that we know what the cost-benefit is. You're living it every day. You might know this right off the top of your head, that some of the things that we've put down on this list just won't make any sense. But we were brainstorming, and we put it all out there.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
I guess the reason that kind of came up is because we do know that there's quite a lot of data in terms of expenditures per pupil. I mean, anybody can pull the state website and see those numbers and compare those numbers. I don't think we've seen them as a board, but that's just a starting point. And at that point, as Dr. Pat said, you're going to start asking, well, why are there differences? And there will be some differences, but you might want to go below that and be able to explain. Again, this is our constituents saying we are high tax and we're not getting the same comparable services. Our facilities aren't what I expect. Why is that? And it would give us a little more understanding and being able to have a better conversation with our constituents also, I think.
Right.
And I think that's worth something.
No, I do understand that.
You'd want to have a discussion of the state aid formula then. I mean, that's why our taxes are what they are. I mean, we cut our budget went down and our taxes went up. The two aren't linked together. If we weren't getting state aid, they would be linked together, but they're not. So there's no correlation there.
Well, I
I mean,
guess.
we can talk about those things, but it's not there. And then as you look at some of these, you run into districts that don't have transportation, or they don't provide it for everybody.
Right.
They're not like in our district where we have a hazardous transportation zone everywhere, and we have to provide transportation for every student. And some of our outlying areas are pretty far away. And you might look at one of these things every once in a while, but I really don't think this is something we want to do every year, because it'll chew up a lot of
Right. I'm
time
not interested.
to go over that. And the more that we bring up, then the more we have questions. And why is that? Like, why is Greendale different on their telephone costs than we are? Okay, well then I can look into that. I mean, that's the way it was when I got here 22 years ago. The board went to the buildings, did their own survey of what was in the buildings and how they were, the condition, and made a report to the other board members. We looked at what the telephone costs were at every building. We got all these kinds of things. The board was very involved in all of this. At the same time, the superintendent was stealing money. Our facilities were in horrible shape. and we had a negative
I'm not stealing
$15,000 fund.
I haven't taken a dime.
So that was when the board was, I mean, we met 2 or 3 times a week, 4 or 5 hours a meeting. And it's not a place you want to go. So information's good, and I think if these are some topics you're interested in, I think we could pick one of them off every once in a while. As a new board member, Alan, I know you haven't seen any of these really, for the time you've been on the board, but they do repeat every once in a while. And I think we could go through these and talk about them, but some of those, it doesn't give you what you're looking for. And sometimes then you want more and more and more and more. And I'm in a department that cut FTE to give it back to the schools so that we could have our teachers staying here, and we cut it to the bone. And now we're doing a $33 million project, and now we're running a $1 million project, and now we're looking at a $1.9 million project. And we're changing insurance, and we have Affordable Care Act, and we're changing the teachers' way we pay them, and the hourly the way we pay them, and we're doing the employee handbook, and there's only so much that can be done. So I would re-echo that it's something that we'd have to look at on how much time we want to put into it on some of the things. Some of these, sure, you can have them. The FTE comes to you in a report that Dr. Miller gives every year that gives you by level what kinds of teachers, where the FTE is, and how it's changing. It isn't on here. If you want it on here, we could try and divide it up that way, but you do see that every year.
I think some of these questions that are on here are good as far as generating philosophical discussions, the discussion of fund balance. That's not something that we've never had a discussion on at the board. We'd like to pick the brain.
We just did the fund balance policy 2 years ago.
We just did that, yeah. So we do need to see it again, and we do have to talk about it again for the very reason that you're bringing up. Our policy does allow us to do other things, and we've talked about doing other things, like fixing Forest Park and some of those things, but we could make it more clear in our policy and have a discussion of it as well. So that's something that we do need to do and we do need to bring up again.
I was referring to the dollar figure that's out there, and what's the
Right.
administrative philosophy of how we want to handle this, how much is enough, that kind of thing, and the open enrollment, what's the administration's philosophy on open enrollment, how does it impact everything else? So I think these are good topics to have a board-level discussion on.
I think you're absolutely right. The fund balance one is one that our staff brings up weekly.
Because it's not a savings account.
It's not a
You don't have 20 million in a savings account, and I think that's one thing that
Well, you're
needs to
exactly right.
continually educate people
In
on.
November, you can't put it on a piece of paper that we have $20 million in our, because it's a lot less than that, so.
I just want to say one thing, though, Jim, as far as how I view the state aid formula. When you, if you compare yourself to if you have a circle, that is our expenditures, and different districts can have different size circles. But the circle, within the circle, you're correct. How it's divided up between tax and state aid, it depends upon valuation. But the size of the circle compared to other districts, it's comparable. You got a pool of expenditures, and it's put together to educate a certain amount of pupils. So there is some comparability that we should be able to make between districts at a very high level. So I don't think we should just say levy's uncontrollable, it's all driven by the state. I just think we need to, as a board, realize that, we do have a role in that. You can say we levy to the limit, but there is other options out there, and as a board, we can talk about that.
Right, my point was that didn't go exactly together with expenditures per student for each thing on the list. We could study this all day, and it has nothing to do with what happens with taxes, or very little. And to know why you're different than another district, even when you start looking at it on a per pupil basis, you have to look at what you're running for programs. We have a lot of technology here. We offer great things for kids, but that does cost money. And that's one of the things that's different here. But the difference with taxes comes down to the value of our community and the number of students we have versus every other community in the state. And we're highly valued, and we get less money from Madison coming back to us. And that's what raises our taxes up.
Well, Dr. Pat said he's going to have the administration look at this, so would you like us to look at this and we come back again and have another discussion?
Yeah, I think it would be worthwhile.
Thank you for your work you put into this. Okay. Item 9 is the board meeting debriefing. Does anyone have a comment? I would just like to recommend that during discussions, we try not to talk over each other, just try to talk one at a time. Sometimes I've noticed we have 2 people going at a time, so I think we have to recognize that.
Well, I guess the document with the question and answer that came through later this afternoon on the project was extremely helpful, and I guess, Tim, you were the one that, it wasn't me that asked all the questions. It felt good to not have to be the one out there asking all the questions. I appreciate that.
You're welcome. When I got the email, and God, I don't know what else to say, you're welcome. When I got the email
But
and...
when I ask the
and-
questions,
and-
I'm the one that gets the negative
got
feedback.
the-
You ask the questions and you're the...
Well, I got the attachment, and it was in there, would be enough to make a decision, and I felt there wasn't enough to make a decision, so that's why I needed to, and this wasn't gonna be about me, this is just something that I just sent to Brad and Sarah, and just said, hey, if there's some things that you can handle in the presentation, I think that would benefit everybody, and the next thing you know, there's an email that goes with everybody, but I think that was fine, because then you guys all had a chance to see it, so.
We appreciate your smiley faces in your email, too.
I have to remember, it's gonna be for public consumption, so.
Consumption.
Item 10, future agenda items. We have October 23rd, the annual health report, October 23rd, summer school update, and October 23rd, a board goals committee update. And then,
Items that we talked about.
right,
And
additional items.
I think that I got a chance to actually look at the report card. I know we kind of didn't really talk about it as a board. There's a lot of information in there. I think it deserves some board discussion. I would like to see that on a future agenda.
An explanation of the report card, and it,
I was thinking we should walk through, I mean, like I said, I've clicked into it. I guess I would like to, like, what does administration think is a more critical, data? What do we need to focus on as far as all the data out there? What has more, what raises a flag for you, and what,
Mike does that in the annual report. You just haven't seen it because that report card is fairly new. So we're happy to present it in isolation, but if you want that kind of comparison, it's nice to have all the other data pieces together so we can explain to you how we value and utilize each piece. So, it's difficult to do it because we're waiting for certain pieces of data. That's why Mike's report, I believe it's in April, I think,
Yeah, well, we did it later, we did it in the fall
yeah.
this year.
this is the
Yeah,
fall.
we can spread those reports around, I mean, divide it up and report data as it comes in, too.
I think that begs a question, and maybe this can be a communication issue. If a board member, in this case Linda, if she had an interest in the report card, but the rest of the board didn't, can we start getting better communication? Maybe Linda could go to Mike and say, explain this to me, and I'm saying if the rest of the board didn't want that. If you all do, that's fine, then our agendas, keep getting built and so on. But I think I have observed a number of times where an issue would be brought up, that maybe there's not a full board interest in it, to the degree that somebody else might have a greater interest to be able to sit down, and sometimes it's really nice to sit down and, with Mike, because he's such a pleasant person, and just sit down and,
Have a conversation.
and get into real depth. I know, like you did with Paulette and so on and so forth, and I know Melissa with Wendy and so on. So I just bring that up as a suggestion, that, because we can fill up the agenda as much as we want, that's your prerogative. But I'm saying there are times, I think, when if it's a singular board member who has an interest, a concern, a question, whatever, maybe going right to the source and being able to spend some quality time, it really makes a lot of sense. So I just throw that out there.
It's a good idea, but then at times, we might not know unless it's brought up here also.
True.
I wouldn't mind hearing a little bit about the report card also, but as much, how in-depth, not really in-depth, but I think when it first came out, it might have been nice to just have a brief discussion, but I'm not sure how much Linda's looking for. I think probably a little more than I would have been.
But I think you can, like Mike said, we'll happily give the overview. Just know some of the comparisons have to wait till we get the rest of the data, because each piece of data we get serves a different purpose. But I think it is important for you as board members to understand it, because it's available to the community. It's talked about by people. It's what real estate agents use to sell school districts. So I think it is good for you to have some working knowledge of the report card.
Well, and like a lot of things, if you don't know certain things, people make assumptions on what they read.
Right.
And there's more to the story.
Right.
Well, so you're wondering where we're leaving this? Would you rather just talk to Mike about it then? I mean, does anyone else have an interest for a report right now at the board
Well,
meeting?
I think I do, but I harken back to when we had a board retreat, and I used the word report. And maybe we don't need a full report, just
Cliff Notes?
a few
Just an
bullet
overview.
items. What'd you say?
Cliff Notes?
Something like that,
Yeah.
So maybe more of an
Just have
update, whatever,
copies
but not,
of-
yeah, not, you don't
Copies
have to
of
go through
available,
it,
talk
but
through it.
I mean, the report's already available.
Yeah.
Right.
But we should, I want to know, you see it you might see it
Right.
differently than we see it. And, I mean, the board's about student achievement. Come on, this is what this report's supposed to be about. This is what the public is supposed to be comparing performance. Doesn't it deserve some board time?
I agree.
I guess what we're saying is throughout the year, we try to provide a lot of that influence into other parts of the presentations that Mike or Wendy or whoever makes.
I think to Linda's point, it's new, so to do it outside of the annual data report is totally fine. And then knowing in the future, you'll have that background, and we'll share the report when it comes out at the, well, it won't come out till spring after this next year, because supposedly you're supposed to test later. So, yeah, put it on the agenda, we'll give you the overview, and you'll get some more of it when we do the full report.
Yeah, that's the
totally
thing about a report like that. There's so much context to it, because now our tests are changing, the standards are changing, and there's all kinds of background. We don't know what that report's gonna look like when we move to a different kind of test. And so, it's hard to look just at the report without talking about some of those context pieces too. But we're happy to do that, if you want to, just bring them in and look at them. We can, I'm in the process of getting comparisons with other districts from all the look-em-ups on that site. So, there's some things that might be of interest to you.
We might have to do that in November, though, because
That's fine.
it'll be, okay,
It makes up future items, right? Doesn't have to.
that's right.
But with the understanding now that some pieces will be missing, correct?
Right, I'll
You'll-
try
you're-
and
you're-
spend
you're
some
okay
quality
with that,
time
though,
with
correct?
Mike beforehand.
Okay.
Okay, we'll spend
All
some
right.
quality time.
Or after.
Or after, just so that we can focus on what might.
Okay. And then to continue on, we have October 23rd, the at-risk report and youth behavior survey summary, and October 23rd. We were just going to discuss a little bit about the board superintendent roles and responsibilities. November 13th, new course approvals and youth options, and November 13th, virtual attendance at meetings, policy review. And then, do I hear a motion to adjourn?
I just have a quick question. Aren't we having a special meeting on the board superintendent roles and responsibilities?
That's what
Yes.
I was gonna ask.
Is it possible to nail that down right now? Does December 4th work for everybody?
Is that a Wednesday?
Yes.
yes.
No, some of you already responded and said it works, but if we could do that instead of,
Let me just check mine.
So then we won't give a little synopsis at this meeting on that then? We'll just wait?
I think we should have something ready, just so they have something to take with them to
Okay.
compare, don't you?
I thought that was the intention.
Well, it was because
Yeah.
that was under the intention that we were going to have it in November, too.
Yes. So we're checking calendars right now.
That's okay.
Melissa?
December 4th.
Tim?
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Okay, December 4th at, what, 6 o'clock would you like to go, or?
Yep.
Okay.
And December 4th, 6 o'clock, special meeting.
That's a good idea. We will, if you are coming from work, we'll have something to eat that night. So come hungry.
Come hungry.
Amy said we have to.
Okay. Then do I have a motion to adjourn?
I'll make that motion.
Motion by Mr. Nielsen, second by Mr. Schleter. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We are adjourned at 8:15.